So we start this Bobby Fischer Rediscovered with Game 2. Game 2 has the following introduction to give you an idea. Fischer's first nickname was the Corduroy Killer because he would show up day after day at the Brooklyn Chess Club in the same pants, sneakers and sweater to play hours of chess. His progress to killer status was extraordinarily quick, even compared with more recent prodigies such as Ponomariov, Rajabov and Karjaki. Fischer received a US Chess Federation rating of 1830 after his first tournament outside Brooklyn, but within 2.5 years he was US champion. I just got good, he explained. The following played against one of his mentors was much more typical of his styles at the time than the Byrne brilliancy. Obviously, the book opens with this game, Donald Byrne against Fischer. Honestly, I think it has been commented, analyzed ad nauseam. I don't want to see it again, honestly. Instead, this Fischer Attilio De Camillo was played in the Eastern Open, Washington DC in 1956. Fischer begins with e4 and black begins with e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6. Notice later Fischer will popularize this move, bishop takes c6, the Spanish exchange, and win game after game. Here in 1956 he played bishop a4, knight f6, castle, b5, bishop b3, d6. Here there is a note by Soltis that says an old variation whose chief virtue is that it may lure white into the knight g5, d5, e takes d5, knight d4 gambit, and whose chief liability is that it tempts black into a premature bishop b4. Okay, now let's return back. So in the game was played d6. That is interesting also because it closed the diagonal for this bishop. c3, and here bishop g4 is considered a mistake. Instead, it seems knight a5 was the move to play. Okay, and there is a quotation of a game between Bronstein and Evans from 1954, so 2 years before this one, that continue with bishop c2, c5, d4 and queen c7. Okay, then it continues with knight b d2. g6 is a mistake because of b4. I honestly don't know why he gave this short quotation of this game, because if we don't know it, we don't know it, and we don't know how it went, right? Was Evans really able to beat Bronstein, or thanks to this opening Bronstein already won the game? Obviously we don't know. Okay, so let's go back into the position in the game, because sometimes I find that this kind of comments, especially in the opening, are kind of distracting. So in the game black played bishop g4, but Soltis put an interrogation mark, which means it's a mistake. h3, bishop h5, and now he puts an exclamation point to this move, but honestly, I'm sorry, what do you think White can do at this point? He needs to move this pawn, because otherwise these two pieces are out of the game. Okay? However, what he says is that White can obtain an advantage thanks to knight d2, f1, g3. Instead, if he plays d4, that seems not so good, and that I understand, because probably you need to support this pawn. So, okay, bishop e7, knight b d2, castle. Instead, here Soltis gives a line with queen d7. Okay, I will not show you that line. Let's continue to see the game to understand what Fischer play and why. After castle, like we saw, rook e1, because you need to make space for this maneuver. Queen d7, knight f1, knight a5, bishop c2. So as you can see, already in 1956 Fischer understood, or maybe because I don't think it was already theory in the sense that we are at move 13, understood that you need to keep the bishop pair. That's more important than losing it, okay? And then the game continues with h6. So why h6 was played? He says, Soltis, that black wants to play knight h7 and eventually g5. Okay? But White continues with g4, which, by the way, is this game is classified as Ruy Lopez, so the Spanish opening, but in reality many of these moves in this maneuver, knight b1, d2, f1, g3, this g4, honestly they are seen also in the Italian game. You can see them in the Italian game, so it's nothing new, at least today. I don't know in 1956, honestly. And here he plays knight bishop g6. Now you must be careful, because this kind of things, g4, can be a problem. Why? Because black can play knight takes g4, right? H takes g4, queen takes g4, check. And now, what do? You play this, great, but queen takes f3, and of course, now there is the refutation, which is knight takes h5, and the sacrifice is meaningless, because black has lost a piece, so the attack didn't go to fruition, right? So, however, you need to be sure when you play g4 that the sacrifice doesn't work, because if it works, you have lost the game. Now let me go back to the position. So this was the position, and we have seen why the knight sacrifice is not working, and why black has to play bishop g6. Also in this case, be aware that you need to see at least 3 moves ahead, which in a tournament game is normal, okay? So So how did white continue? Obviously knight g3, because this is an outpost that is very important. Knight h7, knight f5, as you can see he gets the outpost right away, and here it seems black made another mistake, that is knight b7. Why knight b7 a mistake? Because it says that the knight is added here via c5 or d8, but it was better to play bishop g5, he says. Okay, if he says so, I don't know. Okay, so I don't know why, because obviously he doesn't give enough explanation to explain why bishop g5 was the move to play at all costs. Also because, I'm sorry, just to show you one thing, okay, it says this bishop g5, and then it says if d4, then queen e6, but what if it takes, right? Like, I don't know, takes. Do you take with this? And then it takes back? I don't know. Then it takes. Is this good for black? I don't know. Obviously, I honestly didn't play much the Spanish to know, so obviously I probably needed to study it a little more. And this is why we are here, right? To watch as many games by Fischer as possible. I think in his career he's played 700 rated games, tournament games. And in reality, Fischer has played a lot more. It seems that when he was young, he was playing something like 12,000 blitz games a year. 12,000, can you imagine? Over the board, because in the time there were no online chess sites to play. Okay, so he was at the club morning to or afternoon to evening to night, just playing chess. Okay, so after knight b7, so this knight b7, however, I'm sorry, it's understandable. Why? Because the knight here is doing nothing. So obviously he wants the knight to be in the center. No? He continues with d4, e takes d4, c takes d4, and knight d8. And here there is a diagram. As always, when there is a diagram, you need to stop and ask yourself, in this position, what would you play if you were white? That's why also you are watching the video from the white side, okay, from Fischer side. If you were Fischer, what would you play now? So pause the video, try to guess the right move. Fischer played knight takes e7, check. And here it says, white exchanges a knight that took 4 moves to reach f5 for a bishop that didn't seem to be doing much. And here it says that there is another game, game 95, in which we see something similar. So let's remember, knight b1, d2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now this. So you understand, is like if white has lost 4 tempi to do this. It doesn't make any sense, right? But he says, but this is necessary prelude to closing the center. Since if he played d5 right away, bishop takes f5, g takes f5, and bishop f6 give black good chances. Okay, so that bishop could have been activated by d5. So the first thing is to remove him. After queen takes e7, then we have d5. But now, as you can see, it's only Fischer who can get an advantage on the dark squares because he has the dark square bishop. Black doesn't have it. So that is really a good exchange, right? A good exchange, very good. c5, and now obviously you don't take in c6 just to show that you know the rule of en passant, because that wouldn't be a good idea, right? You want to continue to keep this backward pawn, because it's a backward pawn that now cannot be protected by another pawn because he played c5 there, so you can attack it. So what do you think was Fischer's next move? Bishop f4, beginning to attack. Now we have a piece that is 9 and a piece that is 3. So imagine that you are using 9 points to defend something that the enemy is just using 3 points to attack, right? So clearly black plays knight b7 to defend that. But how does white continue? White plays bishop g3 to avoid possible attack on that bishop that is hanging, in a sense that is not protected by anything. So here you already see that Fischer is a mature player, because before launching a total attack he protects his pieces. Okay, and here in fact it says remarkable caution. White is playing for e4, e5, but there is no obvious way to make progress after bishop takes c2, and here it gives a line. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Okay, let's continue to see. Rook f e8. So also for black the fight for e5 is real. And once we have a weakness that is fixed, what do you do? Because in order to win the game, you need to create another weakness. And here we see that Fischer plays a4. Black played queen f6. Soltis says he should have tried to play this move. But this is honestly understandable. Why? Because he wants to take away the queen from this file. A takes b5, A takes b5, king g2, knight g5. And here there is the explanation. He should have put a diagram here. He says white is closing in after queen takes b2. Okay, so let's watch what happens after queen takes b2. He says rook b1, queen f6, and rook takes b5. Okay, and says, for example, if black continues with knight a5, he plays e5. So not bad for white. This is a good situation for white. If he instead plays rook e7 trying to defend that, white can continue with rook b6 attacking here, or queen b1, and look what he does. Okay, so that's very interesting. And now let's go back to the position from the game. So we were in this position, and instead of playing queen takes b2, black played knight g5, to which Fischer continued with knight takes g5, h takes g5, rook takes a8, rook takes a8. So here we can start to have an idea of what's going on. And now I would like to tell you to pause the video and find out what is the next move played by Fischer. Okay? Why do I tell you that? Because it's an important move that the author of the book put an exclamation point saying that it's very good. So the move is e5. Bishop takes e2. Queen takes e2. And now there is obviously d takes e5. Okay, so how does white continue? Bishop takes e5. Queen d8. So why the position is good for white? Because now white has an isolated pawn that is advanced, kind of very advanced. And when it's this kind of advance, the enemy, in this case black, must try to stop it. And it's a problem. Okay? So that's why he has a good position. What does white plays at this point? So black just played queen d8. If you were white, what would you play? Try to pause the video and find out. I will continue to tell you this because if you just watch the video without using your brain, you're just wasting time. Instead, we want to learn from every single game played by Fischer, right? We want to use him as a role model for improving as chess players. So Fischer played d6. Now, d6, obviously, he must have calculated what happens after knight takes d6, right? In the game, he played c4. His opponent plays c4. But what happens if he plays knight takes d6, right? That's the real question. Okay. So, what will white play? Queen takes c5. Knight c4. Queen takes b5, Queen d3, and this is a very vicious move, right? Why? Because it's threatening this, and the queen is lost. So you must be very careful, right? How does white continue? Obviously with queen c5, rook a2, and bishop c3, where white should win easily, okay? But let's see if instead of knight c4, black plays something else. Let's see. So we were in this position, and Soltis says it was better to play knight takes d6, but I don't think black wins, because after queen takes c5, here it says, let's say that he plays this, okay? There is b4, attacking that, knight b7, queen d5, and here you have queen b6, and then there is this incredible move, boom, bishop takes g7, followed by rook e7. So once you take, obviously, he says you play this, and this is gonna fall down, because if you move it, this is behind. If you defend, this is falling down. Okay? and the white wins. So let's return back to the position. Okay, and we should be in the right position, if I remember the pieces well. They should put some diagrams, a little diagram, it wouldn't be bad. So black played c4 instead of taking this, okay? Queen e4, knight c5, and queen c6. It seems that queen d5 was better, okay? Knight d3, rook e3, and here there is the move rook c8. But there is an analysis that says that knight takes e5 was the wrong move. Let's see why. Okay, so knight takes e5, rook takes e5, rook c8, and queen d5, to which you could follow queen d7, rook e7, queen c6, and queen takes c6, followed by rook e8 check and then d7. It seems that there is a trap in the move played by black. Let's see what is the trap. Okay, so in the game he played this move. The trap is, if you take on b5, what happens? Well, that he plays rook c5, okay, so that is going to be lost. So you cannot take on b5, and this is very interesting because we are nearly in the end of the game, and still one doesn't see this huge advantage by Fischer, like we would think that he gains a piece and so on. Instead we see a typical master level player that gains a small advantage and is able to convert it into a win. So queen b7, rook b8, queen d5, and here there is knight b4. There is a comment by Soltis that says that yes, black should blockade this, but it seems queen d7 loses at this point. So I wish you to buy the book so you can enjoy it. Let's see the rest, okay? After knight b4 he plays queen c5, knight d3, queen d4, rook b6. And instead it seems that now it was the moment for playing queen d7. I don't know how he found it, so that's the part that he should explain in a book. White plays d7, rook b7, and now there is a great move. Can you find this great move played by white? Try to find the great move played by white, because also this is a big blow. The move is bishop c7, boom! Amazing move, amazing move. And now black plays knight f4 check, no? And he hopes that he will play bishop takes f4 so he can take with a rook, right? But he doesn't do that. He plays king f1. And here black resigns. Because obviously if you take here, there is rook e8 check and you are over. If you take with this, there is d8 check with a queen, no? And so you lose in any case. So a beautiful game in 41 moves won by Fischer. Let's continue with game number 3, okay?